You could sit down and literally memorize the dictionary translation of 1,000 English words today, and by tomorrow morning, your brain is going to have thrown like 80% of them straight into the trash.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely will.
It's wild.
Yeah.
It will literally just purge them while you sleep. So, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are hacking the B1 vocabulary barrier.
Right, because that habit of just, staring at lists of translations, it's the worst.
Totally. So we're taking the data, all the linguistic research and the cognitive science that you've brought to us, and we are unpacking a comprehensive step-by-step roadmap for you to master intermediate English.
Exactly. Because rote memorization is honestly the absolute enemy of true fluency. I mean, it gives you this temporary illusion of learning, right?
You feel like you're making progress.
Right, but it completely collapses the second you're in an actual real-time conversation. So what we are doing today is building a psychological and linguistic framework.
We're figuring out what words actually matter, how to trick your brain into keeping them permanently, and then how to use them in the real world.
We're moving from the raw materials of vocabulary to the actual architecture of conversation.
I always think of the language learning journey a lot like being in a car.
Okay, I like that.
When you first start out at those beginner A1 or A2 levels, you're essentially just a passenger, You're sitting in the passenger seat looking out the window.
Just kind of along for the ride.
Exactly. You can see the scenery, you can point at a tree or a building and say a few basic words, but ultimately someone else is driving.
Right. You're entirely dependent on their speed and their translation. If the conversation turns left, you have to turn left.
You're reacting, not creating.
Yeah.
But reaching the B1 level, that is the moment you finally get to slide over into the driver's seat.
You finally get the keys.
Yes. Reaching B1 means you are no longer just a passenger in the English language.
Yeah.
You choose the destination.
But to drive that car, obviously, you need fuel. And in language, vocabulary is the fuel.
Right. You can't build a house without bricks. And you can't express a nuanced thought without the right words.
And when we look at the roadmap in our source materials today, it doesn't just tell you to go out and learn everything. It outlines 10 very specific foundational topics.
Which is such a relief, honestly. I mean, the English language has well over 1 million words if you count all the technical jargon.
Oh, easily. But you don't need 1 million words to drive the car. The data shows that these 10 core topics cover the vast majority of what you need for B1 communication.
So I look at these 10 topics like packing a suitcase for a really long trip. If you just grab whatever is closest to you and throw random items in a bag.
You're going to end up in the mountains wearing a swimsuit.
Exactly. Or sweating on a beach in a parka. You need specific tools for specific environments.
If you don't pack strategically, you're left out in the cold.
So, looking at our roadmap, how exactly do we organize this vocabulary suitcase?
Well, we organize it by moving from the inside out. The sources categorize these 10 core topics into 3 conceptual spheres of life.
Okay, 3 spheres.
Right. And it begins with the innermost layer of your reality, which is sphere 1, the personal world.
That makes total sense. Before you can debate global politics, you have to be able to just describe your daily life.
Exactly. Which brings us to the very first item we are packing, which is relationships and family.
And looking at the requirements for B1 here, there's a very clear shift. At the beginner stages, you just learn labels, right?
Mother, father, brother, friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at B1, you aren't just labeling people anymore. You have to describe the actual quality of the connection.
Yes, you're analyzing the relationship. So, for instance, the roadmap highlights adjectives like close-knit.
Close-knit, that's a great word.
It is. You don't just say, my family's good. You say, we are a close-knit family.
It completely changes the vibe of the sentence.
It really does. That hyphenated compound adjective immediately signals to a native speaker that you understand nuance.
Because it evokes that image of fabric woven tightly together. It means you're deeply connected.
Right, and it changes how you describe your friends, too. You move from saying he is a good friend to saying he is reliable.
Reliable, meaning you can literally rely on them. It speaks to trust.
Exactly, but I also notice a lot of phrasal verbs showing up in this specific category.
Oh man, phrasal verbs. They are the absolute heartbeat of natural spoken English.
They really are often the dividing line between sounding like a textbook and sounding like a real person.
Right, like the phrase bring up, the formal verb might be to raise a child.
But in a casual conversation at a coffee shop, you wouldn't say, my parents raised me to be polite.
No, you'd sound like a robot. You would say, I was brought up to be polite.
Or the phrase, get on. If you want to describe a good relationship, the clinical way to say it is, I have a positive relationship with my colleague.
Which is fine, but the B1 phrasing, the way we actually talk, is we get on really well.
That seems to require a real mental shift for learners.
It does. You have to stop looking for that one-to-one direct translation from your native language.
And just start accepting that English uses these little combinations of simple verbs and prepositions to create totally new meanings.
Which takes us right into the second topic in the personal world, which is hobbies and leisure.
Because again, we see the vocabulary shifting from passive to active here.
I see that in the notes.
Right.
It's moving past basic sentences like, I like tennis, or I play football.
Right. The vocabulary here is about the actual process of having a hobby.
So learning the phrasal verb, take up.
Yes, like I have a lot of free time, so I think I will take up painting.
It implies starting something new, embracing a new habit. It's a very dynamic phrase.
And there's a real focus on categorization in this topic, too, being able to distinguish between indoor and outdoor activities.
Knowing specific terms, like martial arts, rather than just saying fighting sports.
Exactly. I also want to draw attention to the word pastime, which the sources highly recommend for B1 learners.
I actually love the etymology of that word. It's literally just the words pass and time smashed together.
A past.
Yeah, an activity that helps the time pass pleasantly. It's such a gentle way to describe a hobby.
It really is, and using a word like pastime elevates your speech instantly. It shows a real breadth of vocabulary.
So as we move through our daily routine, we come to the third topic in Sphere 1, house and home.
This one is fascinating because our physical environment dictates so much of our mood.
Totally. At the beginner level, you just need to know how to find the bathroom, right? Or point out a bed.
But at B1, you're essentially learning how to be an amateur real estate agent.
You are learning to assess and describe living conditions.
You aren't just saying house or apartment anymore. You're using the broader umbrella term accommodation.
Which is crucial if you are traveling or moving abroad. You need to be able to ask, does the university provide accommodation?
And you learn to describe the feeling of the space. Not just the room is big, but the room is spacious.
Spacious. That's a wonderful word. It implies comfort,
Yeah.
It implies you have room to breathe.
Conversely, you also need the practical vocabulary. You have to be able to ask if the apartment is furnished or unfurnished.
Right, like, do I need to buy a bed or is it already furnished?
And speaking of practical realities, this category includes the inescapable vocabulary of chores.
Ugh. Chores. The mundane reality of keeping that spacious, furnished apartment clean.
This actually brings up a critical mechanism in language learning that the sources emphasize, collocations.
Collocations, words that naturally live together in English.
They are a massive part of B1 mastery, like the phrase, do the laundry.
Right. In a lot of languages, the literal translation might be wash the clothes or make the laundry.
But in English, the verb do is married to the word laundry. You do the laundry.
You do the washing up, you make the bed.
Exactly. If you mix those up and say, I need to make the laundry, a native speaker will figure out what you mean, but
It'll sound off, like hitting a wrong note on a piano.
it completely interrupts the flow. So part of mastering this B1 suitcase is packing these words in their correct pairs.
You don't just pack the left shoe, you pack the right shoe that goes with it.
Which leads us to the final topic in our innermost circle, the personal world. Health.
This is honestly probably the most high-stakes category in the personal sphere.
Oh, without a doubt. If you're traveling or living in an English-speaking country, lacking health vocabulary can be genuinely frightening.
Absolutely. If you go into a pharmacy and all you can say is, I am sick, that doesn't really help anyone.
You need precision. If you eat something and your throat starts swelling, you desperately need the phrase allergic to.
I am allergic to peanuts.
Notice the preposition there, too. Allergic to. Not allergic of or allergic with.
That's another example of dependent prepositions, isn't it? They are such a huge hurdle at the B1 level.
They really are. Verbs and adjectives often just demand a specific preposition, and there is rarely a logical rule for it.
You simply have to learn them as a single unit. I see another one in the notes here. Recover from.
Yes. When you've been ill, you recover from the illness.
You also need to know that if you go to a doctor, they might write you a prescription.
Right, a specific piece of paper that allows you to buy regulated medicine. And you need to understand the word operation if a procedure is required.
Having this vocabulary is so empowering. It lowers your anxiety so much.
If you know you have the tools to describe an allergic reaction or request a prescription, You just feel safer navigating the world.
That is the essence of moving from passenger to driver. You are taking control of your own well-being.
And that wraps up Sphere 1. You can now describe your family, your hobbies, your home, and your health.
But, we can't stay at home forever. Eventually, we have to open the front door and step outside.
Which brings us to Sphere 2, the public sphere.
This is how you interact with society, with institutions, and with the economy.
And the very first institution most of us interact with is education. So topic 5 is education.
The shift here is really interesting. It moves from the physical objects of a school to the abstract concepts of learning.
Right. You already know words like pen, desk, and teacher from A1. Now you need to understand the curriculum.
The curriculum, the overarching plan of what is actually going to be taught, that's a high-level concept.
You're also moving into specific environments like the laboratory for science experiments.
But the roadmap also points out the behavioral vocabulary of education, like the idiom learning by heart.
Which means to memorize something so thoroughly that you don't even have to think about it, you just know it.
Like your multiplication tables or a poem. It's funny that English uses the heart, not the brain, for that idiom.
It implies a deep, almost instinctual internalization of the knowledge.
And on the darker side of educational behavior, the B1 learner has to understand the concept of a cheat.
To act dishonestly to gain an advantage, particularly in an exam.
All about navigating the rules of an institution, which flows perfectly into topic 6, work and career.
Because education prepares you for work, and when you enter the workplace, the vocabulary shifts dramatically again.
It becomes much more formal, much more structured.
You no longer just have friends or classmates. You have a colleague.
That word instantly establishes a professional boundary.
You might need to consult an accountant about your salary or your taxes.
And everyone's favorite career vocabulary, word promote. You want to get promoted. You want to move up the ladder.
But the sources also highlight the vocabulary for when things go wrong. Economic realities require nuanced language.
Like the phrase out of work. Why use out of work instead of just saying unemployed?
Unemployed is a very stark official term. It sounds like a government statistic,
Yeah, it's very cold.
Saying someone is out of work is often considered slightly softer, more conversational. It implies a temporary state.
I am currently out of work, but I'm looking for a new position. It's about managing social interactions gracefully.
Managing social interactions gracefully, that is a great way to describe B1 proficiency.
And speaking of the modern workplace, we cannot ignore the tools we use to do that work. So topic 7 is technology.
We are entirely surrounded by screens and digital infrastructure now. A B1 learner has to be able to articulate their interaction with technology.
This is where we see some really fascinating compound words. If an app or a website is easy to navigate, it makes sense. We call it user-friendly.
Let's break that down because it is a brilliant piece of cognitive linguistics.
Oh, do tell.
You are taking a highly technical noun, the user, and combining it with a warm human adjective, friendly.
You're basically personifying the software.
Exactly. You are saying the software acts like a friend to the person using it. It's a highly abstract concept, and using it correctly shows immense language maturity.
We also have words like up-to-date, meaning current, containing the latest information, and the verb upgrade.
To improve your device or your subscription. But my favorite part of this technology section is how we describe technological failure.
Ah, you're referring to the phrasal verb breakdown.
Yes. When your computer stops working right before a massive deadline, you don't say, "My computer has ceased functioning."
You'd sound ridiculous. You say, "My laptop just broke down."
It's the exact same phrasal verb we use for a car stopping on the side of the highway, or even a person losing emotional control.
He broke down in tears.
It conveys a complete structural or mechanical failure. And again, native speakers default to these phrasal verbs in moments of stress.
They don't reach for formal Latin-based verbs. They reach for visceral, action-oriented phrasal verbs.
So we have mastered the personal world and the public sphere. We can navigate our home, our health, our school, and our office.
But the universe is bigger than our daily commute.
Which brings us to the outermost layer of our suitcase, Sphere 3. The wider world.
This is the vocabulary required to look up at the sky, out at the horizon, and across borders.
And topic 8 is something that is universally discussed, particularly in places like the UK, the weather.
Weather vocabulary at the B1 level is all about degrees of intensity. You're moving way beyond the binary of it is raining or it is sunny.
Because rain is never just rain. If you step outside and it's just a very light, almost misty rain, you wouldn't say it is raining hard.
No, you'd call it a drizzle.
A drizzle is a highly specific atmospheric condition. And what about temperature and feeling?
If the air is thick with moisture, making you sweat, it's not just hot, it's humid.
And if the temperature drops drastically, it's not just cold, it's freezing.
And wind. A violent wind is a storm, but a gentle, pleasant wind on a warm day, that's a breeze.
Having these words allows you to participate in the ultimate social ritual of English speakers, small talk about the weather.
If you can accurately describe a humid drizzle versus a freezing breeze, you can make friends at any bus stop in London.
But we also have to talk about the climate on a macro level. Topic 9 scales our perspective up globally to the environment.
This is where language meets global citizenship. A B1 learner has to be able to comprehend and discuss the forces shaping the planet.
The roadmap places a heavy emphasis on this. You need the term climate change. You need to understand the absolute finality of a word like extinct.
When a species ceases to exist entirely, you also need the action words, like the verb preserve.
To protect something and keep it in its original state, we need to preserve the forests.
And speaking of forests, the general umbrella term for all the animals living in nature is wildlife.
When you learn the word preserve in the context of wildlife, you aren't just learning vocabulary.
You're engaging with global ethics and conservation.
You are participating in a worldwide conversation, which is the perfect segue to our 10th and final topic, travel and transport.
Because if you're putting in the massive effort to reach B1, you are likely using this language to explore the world. You're crossing borders.
Travel vocabulary is the ultimate reward for the language learner.
You need to know the identity of a backpacker, someone traveling lightly, often on a budget, carrying their life on their back.
You need to know the logistics. You look at the airport screen to see when your flight will depart.
You're experiencing the thrill of traveling abroad to a foreign country.
But before you get to enjoy any of that, you have to manage the administration. You have to make a reservation for your hotel.
So we've unpacked the suitcase. 10 pillars: the personal world, the public sphere, and the wider world.
If you systematically conquer the vocabulary within these domains, you have the foundational bricks for almost any situation you'll encounter.
Okay, I have to push back a little bit here, or at least ask a question that I know plagues literally every single language learner.
Go for it.
When we look at this massive architectural blueprint of 10 topics, it feels overwhelming. Is it better for a learner to learn 10 words deeply across these categories, or is it better to learn 100 words shallowly?
I hear this all the time.
Right, like if I have an hour, should I memorize a massive list of 100 translations to cast a wide net, or spend that entire hour deeply studying just 10 words?
The linguistic data and the cognitive science are entirely unequivocal about this. Depth always, always wins over breadth.
Really? Why? Wouldn't knowing 100 words give me a better chance of guessing what someone is saying?
Knowing a word shallowly, like just knowing its one-to-one translation in your native language, is like knowing a person's name but nothing else about them.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Think about it. If you know a guy named John, but you don't know where he lives, what he does for a living, or who his friends are, do you really know John?
No, you just recognize his face in a crowd.
Exactly. So what does it mean to truly know a word at the B1 level? What is the equivalent of knowing where John lives?
I'm guessing it's more than just the spelling.
Much more. To truly know a word, you must possess what linguists call morphological awareness.
Morphological awareness.
You need to know its part of speech. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? You need to know its pronunciation, its spelling, the prepositions it pairs with, and the context in which it's socially appropriate to use it.
Give me a concrete example of this from the roadmap.
Let's take a simple root word like own, as in to possess something.
Okay, own.
If you just memorize own equals to possess, you have one shallow brick. But if you study it deeply, you unlock an entire word family.
Ah, see where this is going.
You realize that by adding a suffix, you create the noun owner, the person who possesses the thing.
Right. I own this car. I am the owner.
Exactly. And then you go a step further and learn the abstract noun ownership, the legal state of possessing something.
We are disputing the ownership of the property.
By deeply understanding the root, you organically expand your vocabulary across multiple parts of speech.
Learning one word deeply is like planting a seed that grows into a tree with multiple branches.
Whereas memorizing a list of 100 random flashcards is like scattering seeds on concrete. They might be visible for a day, but they won't take root.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. You aren't just buying a single screwdriver. You're buying a multi-tool.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the what. We know our 10 core topics, and we know we need to learn the word families deeply. But now we hit the hardest part of the entire journey.
The how.
Yes, the how. How do we actually remember them? This is the transition from the raw materials to the actual mechanics of memory.
Because like you said at the very beginning, your brain is actively trying to throw this information away.
I like to compare the human brain to a very strict, very busy nightclub bouncer.
Okay, a bouncer.
Yeah. You learn a new word. That new word walks up to the door of your long-term memory, hoping to get inside the club.
But the bouncer looks at it.
Exactly. And if that word doesn't have a good ID, meaning it lacks context, it lacks a personal connection, or it lacks a pattern, the bouncer's not letting it in.
It gets kicked to the curb.
Forgot him by breakfast.
Yeah.
So how do we forge a fake ID for these words? How do we convince the bouncer that this vocabulary is VIP and deserves to get into the long-term memory club?
Well, we use psychology. The roadmap outlines 3 highly specific, scientifically backed memory techniques. And memory technique 1 is grouping and pattern recognition.
Grouping and pattern recognition. The brain loves a pattern.
It craves them. The brain uses patterns to create cognitive shortcuts. If it can apply one rule to 10 things, it saves massive amounts of energy.
Makes sense.
A perfect example of how to exploit this is dealing with irregular verbs.
Oh, irregular verbs, the absolute bane of every English learner's existence.
Everyone hates them.
I remember in school, you just get handed this terrible photocopied alphabetical list. Arise, awoke, awoken, be was been, catch, caught, caught.
And the teacher just says, memorize this by Friday.
Yep, it's awful.
It is pedagogically disastrous. Memorizing an alphabetical list of irregular verbs is fighting against the brain's natural machinery.
Because alphabetical order is just an arbitrary human invention, right? It has nothing to do with how words sound or function.
Exactly. So what is the alternative? How do we group them? We group them by phonetics, by vowel sounds.
Okay, by sound.
We look for the internal logic of the language. Linguists call this a blout, the systematic alteration of a vowel in related words.
But the learner doesn't need to know the term ablaut, right?
No, you just need to hear the music. For example, the roadmap suggests learning the IAU group.
The IAU group. Okay, so that would be verbs that shift their core vowel from an I sound to an A sound to a U sound across their present, past, and past participle form.
Precisely. The classic example is drink. Today I drink. Yesterday I drink. I have drunk.
Drink, drank, drunk.
Now, once you establish that melodic pattern in your mind, you attach other words to it.
Sink, sank, sunk.
Ring, ring, ring.
Shrink, shrink, shrunk.
Suddenly, you aren't memorizing 12 separate disconnected words. Your brain only has to learn one single melodic pattern, the IAU shift, and it applies that template to multiple verbs.
You're giving the bouncer a VIP list. Hey, these 4 guys are all together. They wear the same uniform. Let them all in.
Exactly. Another pattern from the roadmap is the IAE group. Write, wrote, written.
Which completely mirrors drive, drove, driven, or ride, rode, ridden.
By organizing your study around phonetics rather than the alphabet, you cut your memorization time in half because you are working with your brain's architecture, not against it.
That is so smart. Okay, so we group things by sound to create patterns. What is memory technique 2?
Memory technique 2 addresses the actual physical decay of memory. We can call it the 45-minute active rule.
The 45-minute active rule.
The source material is very specific about study habits. It suggests spending about 30 to 45 minutes intensely focused on a single vocabulary unit.
Because 45 minutes seems to be the sweet spot for deep focus before cognitive fatigue sets in.
It is, but the initial study session is not where the learning actually happens.
Wait, really?
The critical part of this rule is the follow-up. You must revise that material 1 or 2 days later.
Because of the forgetting curve. If you don't look at it again, your brain assumes you didn't need it and throws it in the trash.
Yes, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve shows that we lose the vast majority of newly acquired information within 24 hours if we don't attempt to retrieve it.
So you have to go back to it.
But here's the most crucial distinction. When you revise 1 or 2 days later, that revision must be active.
Okay, what does active revision actually look like? Because a lot of people just open their notebook, reread the highlighted words, nod their heads, and say, yep, I remember that.
That is passive review, and passive review is a trap. It creates an illusion of competence. Your brain recognizes the shape of the word on the page, so it sends a little signal saying, I know this. But recognition is not recall.
Oh, wow. It's like recognizing a face in a crowd versus actually remembering their name and phone number.
Perfectly stated. Active revision requires struggle. The roadmap advises a simple but brutal method.
Maybe.
Look at the English word in your notebook. Cover the meaning with your hand, look away, and force your brain to generate the meaning from scratch.
Or vice versa, right. Look at the meaning and force yourself to generate the English word.
Exactly. And what if you can't? What if you're staring at the wall and the word just isn't there? It's so frustrating.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
But that frustration is the literal feeling of learning, that feeling of digging into your brain, of straining to find the connection. That struggle is what triggers the brain to build thicker myelin sheaths around the neural pathways.
It tells the brain, this is important. Reinforce this connection.
Yes, the bouncer wants to see you work for it. He wants to run a background check.
So if you can't remember it, you uncover it, check it, cover it back up, wait 5 minutes, and force yourself to retrieve it again.
You have to pull the memory out, not just pour it back in.
Okay, so we're grouping words into patterns, and we're using active, painful recall to force the memories to stick. That brings us to memory technique 3.
Memory technique 3, personalization and expansion.
This is how we give the vocabulary an emotional ID card, right?
Exactly. The sources explicitly warn against simply copying dictionary definitions into a notebook. A dictionary definition is sterile. It's abstract.
Right. A dictionary tells you that spacious means having ample space. That doesn't mean anything to my daily life.
Precisely. To make a word stick, you have to tie it to episodic memory, your memory of your own life events.
So you have to make it about you.
When you write a new word in your vocabulary notebook, you must create a sentence that is true for your own life.
The roadmap provides a great example of this. Let's say the new word is flat, the British English word for apartment. Instead of writing, a flat is an apartment, which is dry and boring, the example says you should write something like, I shared a flat with an Australian girl when I was studying in London.
Look at what happens to the word flat in that sentence. Suddenly, it isn't an abstract architectural concept. It's tied to a specific era of your life.
It's tied to the memory of an Australian accent, the smell of the kitchen, the feeling of studying in London.
It has sensory context. You have given the word a backstory.
And the bouncer looks at the ID, sees it has a history, and lets it in.
That is personalization. Now, the second half of this technique is expansion.
Expansion.
Once you have a word anchored in your personal life, you need to expand its web. Because the brain organizes vocabulary like a spider web, not like a filing cabinet.
Words are connected by association.
So if you learn the word dirty...
You don't stop there.
Yeah.
You immediately follow the strands of the web.
Exactly. You ask yourself, what is the exact opposite of dirty? You find the word clean. Then you ask, what is the extreme, intense version of dirty? You find the word filthy.
So instead of just dropping a single house in the middle of nowhere, you're building an entire neighborhood. Dirty lives next door to clean and down the street from filthy.
When you build neighborhoods of meaning, if you temporarily forget one word, your brain can navigate down the street to a connected word to keep the conversation flowing.
You're building redundancy into your memory. I love that. But I want to pause here because looking at the research, there's a massive pitfall that we really need to warn listeners about.
Oh, definitely.
We've talked about the right way to do it. But what is the worst trap a B1 learner can fall into during this memorization phase?
The trap is something we touched on earlier. Rote, silent, bilingual translation.
Staring at a list where the left column is English and the right column is your native language and just reading them silently.
Yes. Why is that so dangerous? Because it leads to a phenomenon we can call fuzzy memory.
Fuzzy memory.
If you only ever study words silently, in isolation, connected only to a translation, those words will evaporate under pressure.
Like in an exam or a job interview.
Exactly. You might be able to recognize the word on a multiple-choice reading test, where you have all the time in the world to sit and think. But speech happens in real time. It is totally unpredictable.
And if your brain hasn't practiced accessing that word actively, and if it hasn't mapped the auditory sound of the word, your mind will simply go blank.
The pressure of a real conversation is totally different than the peace of a study desk.
Which perfectly sets up our next major hurdle. We've gathered the bricks. We've convinced the bouncer to let them into long-term memory. We have the vocabulary in our head.
But having it in your head is entirely different from catching it when it's flying at you at full speed from a native speaker.
That brings us to section 3, activating the ear. We must transition from silent visual study to real-world auditory processing.
Because listening comprehension is frequently cited as the absolute hardest skill to master.
I always explain this transition with an analogy. Studying vocabulary on a flashcard is like seeing a tiger in a zoo.
It's right there. It's standing perfectly still.
It's clearly labeled. You can look at all its stripes. It is safe and easy to identify.
But listening to a native speaker,
Listening to a native speaker talking at full speed is like trying to spot that same tiger in the wild. It's camouflaged.
it doesn't stand still.
It blends in with all the trees and shadows around it. The words literally bleed into each other. Want to becomes wanna. Going to becomes gonna. How do we train our ears to catch these camouflaged words in the wild?
Well, unlike speaking or writing, you don't control the pace when you're listening. You are at the mercy of the speaker's speed and accent. But the roadmap offers a brilliant strategy to counter this: interactive dialogue and context priming.
Let's unpack context priming. It sounds like setting the stage in your brain before the play even begins.
That's exactly what it is. Psychologists call it top-down processing. Before a single word is spoken, you use your knowledge of the situation to predict what vocabulary is likely to appear.
So if I'm walking into a restaurant, I shouldn't walk in with a completely blank slate.
Right. If you walk in with a blank slate, your brain has to search the entire English dictionary for every single word the waiter says. It takes way too long.
You'll just freeze up.
Instead, as you walk through the door, you actively prime your brain. You subconsciously pull the food and drink vocabulary file to the front of your working memory.
You're preloading the software.
You anticipate the language. You prepare your ears to hear words like bake, bitter, delicious, menu, order, bill.
Because you have narrowed down the possibilities. So when the waiter speaks quickly and says, "Would you like to see the dessert menu?" Your brain catches menu effortlessly because it was already looking for it.
It's like knowing what color car you were looking for in a massive parking lot. It suddenly just jumps out at you.
So how do we actually practice this priming? We can't just walk in and out of restaurants all day.
The roadmap highly recommends interactive learning with a partner. You cannot master listening by only listening to podcasts or watching movies because those are passive.
You need an environment where auditory processing is immediately linked to vocal processing.
The ping-pong match of conversation. The text gives a fantastic example of how to practice irregular verbs interactively. Instead of staring at a list, your study partner asks you a direct question. Have you ever ridden a horse?
Okay, let's break down what happens in the brain there. First, I have to hear the sound ridden and recognize it as the past participle of ride, even if they say it super fast.
Yes, you process the auditory cue, and then under the mild social pressure of the conversation, you have to actively formulate the correct grammatical response. Yes, I have ridden a horse before.
Or, no, I've never ridden a horse.
By doing this, you are locking in the grammar and the vocabulary simultaneously. You are associating the physical sound of the word with its meaning, and then forcing your own vocal cords to produce it.
You're training the tiger to come to you.
The roadmap also points out a really clever hack here. We can use the standard B1 speaking exam topics as literal listening maps.
This is a highly strategic approach. The B1 speaking exam always covers predictable topics, right? Hobbies, daily routine, school, travel.
But most learners only think of these as things they need to prepare to talk about.
But you're saying we should use them as categories to train our listening.
Absolutely. If a conversation or a listening test turns to the topic of daily routine, you don't just sit back and passively let the words wash over you. You lean in.
You actively listen for the structural markers of a routine. You're listening for the sequence words. First, then after that, finally.
You're waiting to hear if they describe themselves as an early riser or a night owl. You listen for the B1 phrases associated with habits, like stick to a schedule.
By anticipating the vocabulary of the roadmap, you cut right through the camouflage.
Which brings us back to the ultimate camouflage, phrasal verbs. We discuss them in the personal sphere: bring up, get on, take up.
But the roadmap makes a very strong point that recognizing phrasal verbs in connected speech is the absolute ultimate test of B1 listening comprehension.
It really is the final boss of B1 listening.
Why are they so incredibly tricky for the ear to catch?
2 reasons. First is the phonetic reality of how native speakers talk. Phrasal verbs are almost always heavily blended together. A native speaker rarely enunciates get, on.
They push it together into a single phonetic block. Gettin', take up, becomes take up.
So if you are listening for 2 separate words, you will miss them entirely because the native speaker just created a new, mashed up sound.
Wow, okay. And the second reason?
The second reason is cultural preference. Native English speakers overwhelmingly prefer Anglo-Saxon phrasal verbs over formal Latinate verbs in casual speech.
Give me an example of that split.
If a machine stops working, The formal Latin-based way to describe it is, the machine ceased functioning. A learner can usually understand that because it sounds similar to Romance languages.
But a native speaker in an office won't say that. They will say, the printer broke down.
Or on the phone, I will return your telephone communication versus I'll call you back.
Precisely. Call back, break down, ask out, give up.
If you haven't trained your ear to catch the verb and its attached preposition as a single unified block of meaning, you will be completely lost in a casual conversation.
The native speaker will sound like they are speaking in code.
They are using the casual code, and the only way to crack the code is to practice hearing them as one sound.
Okay, so we've gathered the vocabulary bricks. We've memorized them using active recall, grouping, and personal connections. We've trained our ears to anticipate context and cut through the camouflage of native speech.
We have arrived at the final stage of our journey, Section 4, the ultimate test, real-world application in speaking and writing.
We are sitting in the driver's seat, the engine is on, and it is time to put the car in gear. Let's start with speaking. How does a learner confidently take these 10 mapped topics and actually deploy them in a high-pressure situation, like a B1 exam or a job interview?
It comes down to strategic mapping. You have to map the high-value vocabulary directly to the anticipated questions. You want to steer the conversation toward the words you know you can use well.
The roadmap provides an excellent specific example of this, using the school and education topic from Sphere 2. A very standard, almost boring B1 examiner question is, what subjects do you enjoy at school?
Now, a nervous learner, or an A2 level learner, will simply try to survive the question. They will give a one-word answer, English. Or maybe, I like English.
Which is factually correct. It answers the question. It's grammatically flawless. But it does absolutely nothing to demonstrate B1 proficiency.
It shows the examiner nothing about your vocabulary.
Exactly. A true B1 learner doesn't just survive the question. They use the question as a stage.
They use it as an opportunity to showcase their Sphere 2 vocabulary. Look at the model answer provided in the source material.
Instead of just saying, I like English, the model answer is, I really enjoy studying English. To prepare for exams, I usually make summaries and do practice tests. I prefer studying alone because it helps me concentrate better.
Let's dissect the brilliance of that answer. In 3 natural flowing sentences, the speaker has seamlessly woven in 3 high-value B1 education terms, exams, practice tests, and concentrate.
They didn't just name a subject. They described the process of studying. They demonstrated that they understand the environment of education.
That is the difference between being a passenger and being a driver. The passenger just answers English and waits for the next question.
But the driver takes the wheel, elaborates, and intentionally drives the conversation toward words like concentrate.
You are taking control of your own fluency. Now, let's look at the other side of output. Application in writing. Writing is a very different beast than speaking.
It really is. Speaking happens in real time. It's messy, it's fast, and you can use body language to help convey meaning.
Writing gives you the absolute luxury of time, but the structural rules are much, much stricter.
The roadmap spends a significant amount of time exploring how vocabulary must shift dramatically based on registered meaning, whether a situation is formal or informal.
At the B1 level, mastering the personal letter and the formal email is a massive component of the curriculum. You're constantly asked to write to friends, to businesses, to institutions.
And the roadmap outlines a very specific 5-part structural template for B1 letter writing. If a learner can internalize this structure, they essentially have a bulletproof container.
They just have to pour the right vocabulary into the right sections.
The 5 parts are universally applicable. Number 1, the greeting. Number 2, the opening. Number 3, the body, which contains the actual message. Number 4, the closing. And number 5, the sign-off.
What is truly fascinating here is how the choice of a few specific vocabulary words in the opening completely dictates the tone and psychological feel of the entire letter.
Let's look at the contrast. If you were writing an informal letter to a friend, perhaps using that hobbies and leisure vocabulary to invite them to take up a sport with you, your opening should reflect that intimacy.
You would use an informal opening. The roadmap suggests a phrase like, I'm writing to tell you about. It's casual, it's direct, it feels like a warm hug.
But what if you were writing a formal request letter? Say you're writing to a hotel manager regarding accommodation, or to a university admissions office regarding the curriculum.
If you start that letter with, I'm writing to tell you about, it is a massive failure of register. It sounds overly familiar, almost rude.
It's like wearing flip-flops to a job interview. You have to put on the suit, You must shift the tone using formal vocabulary.
Instead of the casual phrasing, you reach for the formal verbs. You use a phrase like, I am writing to ask about. Or even better for demonstrating proficiency, I am writing to inquire regarding.
Just changing tell you about to inquire regarding changes the entire psychological posture of the letter. It moves from a hug to a firm, professional handshake.
And I want to address a huge misconception here. A lot of learners think that B1 writing is about showing off.
Right, they think they need to find the longest, most complicated words in the thesaurus to impress the examiner.
That is the fastest way to lower your score. B1 writing is absolutely not about demonstrating philosophical complexity or using archaic five-syllable words that you barely know how to pronounce.
The roadmap notes that a typical B1 writing task is only about 100 to 120 words long.
That is a tiny amount of space. You do not have the room to ramble or be overly poetic. B1 writing is about extreme clarity and rigid structure.
You need to accomplish a very specific task. You are asked to invite a friend, or complain about a broken-down laptop, or ask for information about a reservation.
Your goal is to use the targeted vocabulary from the 10 topics accurately within that 5-part framework. Accuracy, clear structure, and appropriate formal or informal tone are vastly more important than trying to sound like Shakespeare.
Keep it clean. Keep it structured. Use the words you actually own.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. We have essentially mapped out the entire cognitive and linguistic journey of the intermediate English learner. Let's do a comprehensive recap of the roadmap for you, the listener, so you can walk away with a clear action plan.
Sounds good. Let's start from the beginning.
We started by identifying the raw materials. You cannot pack your suitcase blindly. You must organize your study around the 10 core topics, moving from the inside out.
You master your personal world, your close-knit relationships, your hobbies, your spacious home, and your health.
Then you step into the public sphere, the educational curriculum, the professional workplace, and the user-friendly technology.
Finally, you look out at the wider world discussing freezing weather, environmental preservation, and international travel. And remember, dive deep into word families. Do not just memorize shallow lists.
Next, we tackled the mechanics of memory. Do not let the bouncer kick your vocabulary out of your brain. Abandon the alphabetical lists and use phonetic pattern recognition, like grouping irregular verbs by their vowel shifts.
Respect the biology of your brain by utilizing the 45-minute active rule. Force yourself to struggle through active recall. Do not settle for the illusion of passive review.
And most importantly, personalize every single word. Tie the vocabulary to your own memories and expand it into semantic neighborhoods of synonyms and antonyms.
Then we transition to the real world by training the ear. Don't let the camouflage tiger sneak past you. Use context priming to anticipate the vocabulary before you enter a situation.
Use the speaking topics as listening maps to identify structural markers, and practice interactively to train your brain to decode those completely mashed up, inherently stressful phrasal verbs that native speakers love so much.
Finally, we discussed deployment, taking the wheel. In speaking, don't just survive the question. Steer the conversation toward your mastered vocabulary to build depth.
And in writing, respect the boundaries of the 5-part structure. Choose your verbs carefully to control the formal or informal tone, prioritizing absolute clarity over unnecessary complexity.
It is a phenomenal roadmap.
It really is. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to step back from the mechanics of grammar and flashcards. I want to leave you with a deeper, perhaps more philosophical thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today about acquiring this level of vocabulary.
I think that is entirely appropriate. Because language learning is not just a mechanical exercise. There's a deeply established concept in cognitive linguistics, often related to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, or linguistic relativity.
Linguistic relativity. The idea that the language you use actively shapes the way you think.
Exactly. Language is not merely a tool for communicating thoughts you already have. Language is the lens through which you actually perceive reality. As you acquire this B1 vocabulary, you need to realize that you aren't just learning new alternative labels for old things you already know.
You are actually building new mental pathways. You are expanding the boundaries of your mind.
Consider this practically. Think about the word spacious from our house and home topic. Before you truly internalize that word, you might walk into a room and your brain would simply categorize it as big or not big.
A very binary, flat way of seeing the space.
But spacious carries a completely different emotional weight. It carries the feeling of openness, of architectural intent, of breathing room, of psychological comfort.
Once you truly own the word spacious, You might actually walk into a room tomorrow and perceive the light and the geometry differently than you did today because your brain now has a designated category for that specific feeling.
That is incredible. Or think about the technology vocabulary, the concept of user-friendly. If you don't have that concept, you might just think an app is good or bad.
But once you understand the abstract idea that a piece of software should act as a friend to the user, you start evaluating your entire digital life differently.
You start demanding better design. You recognize when a system is hostile versus when it is accommodating. The vocabulary gives you the power to critique your environment.
So the words we learn actually expand the very boundaries of our world. They give us higher resolution vision.
They absolutely do. You are not just memorizing a dictionary. You are giving yourself new cognitive tools to think with. You are upgrading the operating system of your mind.
I absolutely love that thought, upgrading your mental operating system. And, getting back to where we started, when you realize that language actually shapes your thoughts, you really understand why reaching the B1 level is such a massive, life-altering milestone.
You are no longer just looking out the window of the car.
You are no longer letting someone else choose the route, dictate the speed, and describe the passing scenery to you in simple terms. You have earned the keys.
You understand the mechanics of the engine. You know the rules of the road.
You have packed your suitcase with the exact tools you need for the journey. You have the vocabulary to choose your own destination and describe what you see when you get there. You are finally truly driving the car.
It's a great feeling.
Thank you for joining us on this massive journey today. Apply these techniques, trust the process, have a great drive, and we will see you on the next deep dive.